Let's look now toward the Pacific, having just talked a little bit about Europe. So, what is your assessment of the situation now from an American defense perspective? You wrote a piece recently in Time magazine about this. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit.
Well, I think the military situation and thus our geopolitical situation is very grave and in fact deteriorating. So there for reasons that remain somewhat opaque to me, there's still a sense that we can't actually be beaten by the Chinese, and I don't think that's correct at all. In fact, a lot of military audiences, there's almost in some quarters there's almost a throwing up the hands kind of situation. And China's first target for breaking apart what I think of as an anti-hegemonic coalition in Asia is Taiwan, which while we have a politically ambiguous sort of position on from a defense planning point of view, I think is effectively within our defense perimeter. And from public statements of defense officials and military officers, we know that we are getting beaten in war games going forward, and the situation is deteriorating. The Chinese increased their defense spending just earlier this month. I think it was announced by over 7%. Again, so in the midst of a COVID slowdown, economic slowdown that they're facing. And they, of course, have advantages of scale and proximity and focus that we don't. So we actually need to be increasing our prioritization on Asia rather than going with inertia or the status quo, because we're significantly vulnerable in a lot of ways. And the problem, Joel, in Asia is that China is half, basically, of the GDP or what have you, power of Asia. So there's no buffer in the way that the tragic fate of the Ukrainians has provided the Germans effectively with a buffer, so that they could decide after Ukraine was invaded to go to 2%. It would have been better for the Germans to have done that before and maybe avoided this outcome. But if Taiwan falls, the geopolitical and military situation in Asia will be exceptionally acute. And Japan is a lot smaller than the Chinese economy, even, and let alone the other countries. So it's, and I think, look, if we learn anything from what's happened in Ukraine, it's that, as I said, that Putin and the Kremlin invested a lot of money in restoring the Russian conventional military. They clearly telegraphed significant concern or interest in Ukraine. And eventually we had an invasion. And, the Chinese have invested a lot of money in shaping the People's Liberation Army for the Taiwan fight, and they've telegraphed very clearly their willingness to use force against Taiwan. So I think we should take them at their word and be prepared in order to avoid it.